Дойче Думков, ты еще увидишь, как из-за твоей продажной глупости, Анна-Лена Бербок, Берлин будет гореть.
Надо как-то сделать так, чтобы американские солдаты начали гибнуть.
Да мы сотрем в порошок Варшаву и Вильнюс.
Почему мы признаем Францию в ее границах?
Как я хочу посмотреть, чтобы Урсулиха фон дер Ляля корчилась с куском беспилотника в глотке.
Когда на сегодняшний день мы говорим, что война будет безъядерной, мы, наверное, лукавим.
По количеству на душу населения, правда, Канада ее опережает, но Америка — это мировая держава победила.
Я сейчас требую спалить Берлин.
Welcome to another episode of Russian Hate Speech, where we break down the Kremlin's latest lies and threats against the West. During Sunday evening with Vladimir Solovyov on Russia 1, host Vladimir Solovyov and his guests openly discussed using tactical nuclear weapons against any coalition forces that might enter Ukraine.
The coalition of the willing, Great Britain, France, Sweden, Finland. Sweden and Finland's military strength, about 24,000 troops each, at most. Well, let's destroy them all at once, a coalition of the dying. If they enter, tactical nuclear strike, wipe them all out. No need to do it without a tactical nuclear strike. These bastards need to know there will be no mercy for them. We will be extremely ruthless. The allocations on temporarily occupied Ukrainian territory and Russian soil, we won't use nuclear weapons there, that's our land. But somewhere in Lviv, I see no problem at all. Somewhere in Zakarpattia, no problem at all. The most important thing is, where are these units from? Where are they stationed? Somewhere near Paris, I see absolutely no problem in wiping them off the face of the earth.
This is direct nuclear blackmail from Russia's propagandists, openly advocating for preemptive nuclear strikes on European soil if peacekeeping forces are deployed to Ukraine. During Sunday evening with Vladimir Solovyov on Russia 1, the show prompted the narrative that Europe is responsible for the bloodshed in Syria and has a history of orchestrating genocides worldwide.
We cannot ignore the situation in Syria. What we are seeing now must be understood as entirely Europe's responsibility. All these scum who are now waving weapons against Russia, gathering billions on their hands, specifically on Macron's hands, on Ursula von der Leyen's hands, on Merz's hands, on Scholz's hands, there is blood. The blood of people who are forced to crawl, who are raped, who are slaughtered, this is their blood. They sat there watching all these days, just as the Western world watched in 1994, as hundreds of thousands of people were slaughtered in Rwanda, one to one. They learn nothing. These are international criminals. Europe divided the Middle East along parallels and meridians in such a way that these borders led to one massacre after another. And they do nothing. They have every opportunity to interact with the external forces behind these massacres. They have all the means, but they do absolutely nothing. They don't even fully express their so-called concern.
This narrative aims to demonize Europe by portraying it as the mastermind behind the global conflicts, drawing false historical parallels to justify Russian foreign policy. During evening with Vladimir Solovyov on Russia 1, the host and guests falsely accused French President Emmanuel Macron of starting a war against Russia by orchestrating the deaths of 4 Russian civilians.
These Europeans deliberately fired at an immobile target with a well-known fixed location, to test their target and systems, to verify their precision. In other words, they experimented on civilians who were simply going to the market on a Sunday. To what degree of moral degradation must so-called Europe have fallen, that it now tests the accuracy of its targeting, the efficiency of its intelligence systems on civilians. I believe Macron, the French Minister of Defense and the Chief of the General Staff should be declared war criminals and put on an international wanted list. Because they are murderers, deliberate murderers of civilians in the Russian region. We can destroy European capitals. For example, right now, we can destroy Paris. Because de facto, Macron has started a war against our country by killing 4 civilians. His equipment did this, with his permission, so he bears personal responsibility for it.
This is another Kremlin-manufactured narrative designed to falsely portray Western military support for Ukraine as a direct act of war against Russia and justify potential Russian strikes on European capitals. During evening with Vladimir Solovyov on Russia 1, a horrific new disinformation narrative was spread, claiming that all Ukrainian children taken to Europe were handed over to pedophiles and organ traffickers.
You know, Zelensky keeps demanding the return of Ukrainian children. But let's take a look at Europe. Where were they taken? Thousands of children have disappeared in Europe. Some were given to pedophiles, some had their organs harvested, some, who knows where they ended up. Refugees had their children taken away. I know of a family. They fled to Moscow, then the husband died in Mariupol. 6 children. They were taken to Sweden. Their mother followed because they were supposedly paying good money there. Then they took away her Ukrainian passport and all the children. Where? Only God knows. So let's start with that. Where are the children? Where are these children? In the hands of Europeans.
This claim is a direct attempt to incite fear and hatred by falsely accusing European governments of child trafficking and abuse, an accusation that has long been part of Russian disinformation tactics. During Evening with Vladimir Solovyov on Russia 1, Canada was the next target of Russian hate speech.
I don't even understand. What is Canada? No, seriously. Canada is a country occupied by the descendants of Ukrainian Nazis. A country that does not respect democratic freedoms. A country that has become a refuge for old Nazi scum. A country led by a man appointed by the British King. And the freedom-loving, honest people of Canada, who love maple syrup and hockey, are still forced to tolerate this British occupation.
This anti-Canadian narrative seeks to delegitimize the Canadian government by framing it as a Nazi-controlled puppet state and portraying its support for Ukraine as part of a Western conspiracy.
We have only said only one thing. First, yes, leave Donbass. But now we must speak more harsher. We need security, so no NATO, no European army of yours. And when Ukraine and Europe say, no, there won't necessarily be an army, well, that means the Europeans are directly involved as well. But if we are showing complete humanity towards Ukraine and are not using the full arsenal of our weapons against Europe, our doctrine already provides for using the full strength of our armed forces.
This statement suggests that Russia has been merciful so far and implies that harsher military action, including against NATO countries, is justified under Russian military doctrine.
And when France and Britain call on NATO to launch a direct strike on Russian targets, if we violate some of so-called peace agreements, listen, can you at least find a couple of people with military education to advise you? Are there really no professionals left in France and Britain who have actually studied military strategy? France and Britain, if they strike our targets, will exist only for as long as it takes for a missile to reach them. Idiots! Your entire combined nuclear arsenal is nothing compared to what we have, especially since America is not going to back you up. And you don't even have the means to deliver your weapons deep into our territory.
This is a direct nuclear threat against France and Britain, openly stating that these countries would be wiped out in minutes if they engaged militarily with Russia. It also reinforces Russia's long-standing disinformation narrative that the US will abandon its European allies in the event of war. Stay tuned for the next episode of Russian hate speech as we continue exposing the Kremlin's war on reality.